Hello everybody and welcome to Chess24 and welcome to my game of the day. Today we saw the match Kramnik versus Nepomniachtchi from the Russian Team Championships, and it was an interesting matchup because Vladimir Kramnik has been on a bit of a roller coaster ride recently. Shamkir, he lost 3 in a row, got one back in the Russian Team Championships, won, lost. He's not really finding stable form at the moment. So playing white against Nepomniachtchi today was an important game for him. And let's have a look and see what happened. Well, Nepomniachtchi playing black played a G6 system. He's a Grunfeld player. He likes these fianchetto systems. So we see Kramnik employ the move Bishop G5, which we've seen recently. This has been played by a lot of the top guys, including Carlsen, the Torre attack. It's not a particularly harmful system if black knows what he's doing, but it's one where white basically tries to avoid main theoretical lines, and Nepo is well prepared in those, having done some work with Carlsen amongst others. So he plays a line where white plays very standard moves. He plays e3. Another move here is to go c3, followed by either e3 or e4. So e3 is slightly offbeat in that sense. But Kramnik just wants to play this system with c3 in this order, get his pieces out, and say, okay, well, let's get a game. Nepomniachtchi reacts very typically in a classical way in the center with e5. And after castles, plays h6, kicking this bishop h4, and now another very standard move in these positions is to play queen e8, getting out of the pin, but also threatening e4, winning a piece. And here Kramnik plays the move e4. So his claim is that he can play this move now, given the fact he's more developed, and it feels like the right move to me, gaining some space in the center. Now in this position, Nepomniachtchi plays a very standard move, but the move knight h5 is actually the move I thought was most critical and the most standard, where now that white has played e4, he's given up this f4 square for the knight to jump into, and now the fact that the knight isn't actually pinned, well, that's great news. So I'm wondering whether that was a try, but maybe white could just play rook e1, and if knight f4, bishop f1, something like that, and claim that nothing much is going on here. Black doesn't really want to go g5 too much because he weakens this f5 and h5 square, which the white knights can get to very quickly. So knight h5 was definitely a possibility. Well, Nepomniachtchi played b6 because this is a very solid way of playing. You develop the bishop to b7 and try and connect the rooks. Rook e1 was played, bishop b7, and now a4 by Kramnik. Once more, a very standard move. And now the question that black has to answer is whether he wants to play the move a6 or a5. White has got a tangible threat here of playing a5, which is a real nuisance of a move to face, because then a6 is always a threat. There's always pressure down the a file with a takes b6. So you either go a6 and meet a5 with b5, which is definitely a way to play, but you have to be careful that white doesn't play b4, d5, c4 and try and get some queenside bind going on, or you play as Nepomniachtchi did with a5. The problem with a5 is that it does give away this b5 square, and Kramnik utilizes that immediately by playing bishop b5. Now the move d takes e5 is definitely in the air, so he has to do something. Getting out the pin makes sense. I'm surprised he didn't play a move like queen e6 here, or even queen e7, but queen e6 felt like a decent move, because if you provoke d5 and then go back to e7, I'm not sure whether white's gained a lot here, because now you've got this great square for your knight on c5. So I'm wondering whether queen c8, well, it's an interesting move. Looks strange, but he did have another idea, and that was to maybe swap bishops off via bishop a6. So in this position, he took on e5, knight takes e5, there was an exchange, and now played f3. And actually, this looked like it worked out very much for Vladimir Kramnik, because he's managed to stabilize the position. He's still better coordinated. He's threatening to unravel very quickly as well. So maybe a tad better. Nothing major. Pawn structure is symmetrical now. But I would take white here. Rook d8 was played, queen c2, and now queen e6. And bishop f2. And, well, knight h5. Well, this was an interesting move by Nepo. We saw it a little earlier on, and again, it's come back. He wanted... The knight on f6 wasn't really doing much. It was being restricted by this e4 pawn and f3 pawn, so it found another route. And this is very typical to go knight h5 to come into f4. And now Kramnik plays the move b4. It's a very, very double-edged move. It's probably the first critical moment of the game. He clearly wasn't content with just sitting back and not doing much. So he played b4, but the problem with this move is that, well, a lot of the time this pawn can eventually become weak. Also, with various exchanges, you give up squares such as d4 and c5, so I wasn't sure about it. Perhaps here, Nepomniachtchi should have just played knight f4, and after takes played rook takes. And again, it's you've managed to somehow reduce the strength of these connected pawns on the queen side. That said, after knight b3, rook a8, and maybe something like a5, maybe Kramnik thought he had a bit of initiative here, but I think the move bishop a6 is probably good enough to at least equalise. I don't think black's got any trouble here whatsoever. Nepomniachtchi played bishop f8, which can't be bad, and after rook eb1, protecting the pawn, now knight f4, and actually, being a King's Indian player myself, I think I'd take black here. I've got all my pieces working, they're all doing something. The only problem piece at the moment is this bishop on b7, but that can be easily exchanged for the other bishops. So I think around here, Nepomniachtchi was doing fine. Kramnik played bishop f1, and now, yes, he completed his plan by playing bishop a6. This is a really good move, because he's trying to exchange this bad bishop, and I think, once again, black is doing fine. Kramnik played b5. This is a very good move, because after bishop b7, you know, black has lost a move, but more importantly, white has managed to gain some space. Yes, the queenside structure is now fixed, but white's plan really does consist of trying to break things open with the c-pawn march. If black could stabilise here on the dark squares, let's say he could route this knight to c5, the story would be very different. But unfortunately, his queen is on e6. If the queen were on f6, after the move c4 is played in the game, he could just go knight back to e6, and he's got some beautiful squares, but he can't get there. Instead, he plays bishop b4. Maybe here it was time to play queen f6 anyway. The point is that after c5, black has got the absolutely stunning move, knight h3 check, a beautiful little tactic. And if g takes h3, queen g5 check, and you win the knight. And that's a winning position. So queen f6, I think, was a really good move here. And then suddenly you've got your knight into the dark squares, and I think black's probably a bit better. Instead, Nepomniachtchi played bishop b4, which also looks kind of reasonable, but now Kramnik uncorked a very interesting move. The computer probably doesn't like it, but over the board I think it's a very good practical try, because here, well, if you go, I don't know, something like knight b3, well, black's got a number of moves, but the move c5 is one that's really interesting, just locking in this bishop. And if you don't take it, well, then black's got just complete domination down the d-file, and white's got weak pawns for eternity, whereas he's never really getting to b6. So Kramnik played the very interesting move, rook takes b4. I think a very, very good move. an exchange sacrifice, a pure exchange sacrifice, but now to be followed up by c5. And the point is that he's going to get squares for his pieces. He's going to get c4, he's going to get c5, he might even win the pawn on b4. There are lots of things going on in this position. So, a very good try by Kramnik. Nepomniachtchi played queen f6. Maybe already starting to go slightly wrong here. Knight c4, and Kramnik's pieces jump into life, as I mentioned previously. Knight e6 was played. Well, now at least I've got a pawn for it, but Nepomniachtchi's idea is that he gets this square for his knight. And I don't think black should be worse here after queen c3. But then again, I don't think he should be better. And over the board, this is much easier for white to play, especially because he's got a very simple plan of marching Alfred the a-pawn up the board to gain some more space to really hem the black pieces in. I think Nepomniachtchi here was feeling the pressure. Bishop c8 is okay. And now bishop a5 by Kramnik. It's possible that even a5 was a move here, because after knight takes b5, you've just got queen takes e5, and an ending like this, I'm not sure. The bishop's coming to c4. You've got the pawn going to a6. I don't think this is clear at all. I think white still has chances. Well, bishop a5 was played, attacking c7, queen e7, and now a nice prophylactic move by Kramnik, king h1, just getting out of any checks potentially on that long diagonal. Bishop b7, bishop b4, queen e6, and knight a5. Maybe bishop b7 again was slightly inaccurate, because now it looks as though Kramnik is gaining some momentum. After queen b6, goes back, repeats once, but now plays rook c1. Now you have to do something about c7. He played rook d7. And Kramnik here, he's got a number of ideas. Knight b3 is actually a very interesting move, but he plays the human move h3, just giving some lift. And it's very difficult for black to make any moves here. He's very sort of tied up in this position, very uncomfortable. Doesn't have a clear plan, in my opinion. King h7 was played, and knight c4 comes back. And now, finally, Kramnik pushes with a5. So it's the same idea as I mentioned before, except that now, with the rook on d7, the rook's getting hit a lot of the time after exchanges on e5. Rook b8 was played, but now knight e3. We were approaching the time control here, so Kramnik didn't do anything too committal. And rook b8 probably wasn't so good, because now after knight e3, well, now it's total domination. You've protected everything. You've got c-file control, and the position is just better for white now. h5 by Nepomniachtchi, a6, bishop a8. Now that bishop is really a sorry sight on a8. It's got no squares at all. And queen c5, just to protect on b5. Queen b3 and bishop c3. Queen b3 was looking to mix it up, attacking the e3 knight. Not really much going on. Bishop c3 is accurate. The queen came back. And now bishop c4. Notice how slowly white's position is really improving here. Queen f6. And now bishop takes d4 was played. That's good enough to win. Actually, queen f6 was a decisive error. He should have played queen d6. But even here, after, for example, takes, and bishop b4, followed by bishop c5, black's position is falling apart. Rook d7, a7, rook b7. And now bishop c5 should do the job, because after knight takes b5, bishop d5, and these bishops are just wreaking havoc in the black position. Queen f6 was unfortunate because it does lose immediately after bishop takes d4, takes, and knight d5, and there's nowhere to go. Queen h8 was tried, but after rook d1, d3, takes. Nepomniachtchi tried a few things, but this ending is really just horrendous. Can't do anything. 2 pawns to the exchange, strong pieces, game over. King g7, rook a3, f5 was tried, but after a7, rook b7, and now very strong move, rook a6. The position was over. Black's rooks don't work here. Takes, rook f7 was tried, but now white's got another passed pawn with e5, c6, and knight b6, and that was that. Well, white wins by force after this combination. So, not the most precise of games, it has to be said, by either colour, but that said, Kramnik showed that he can still produce very important moves in critical moments. And the critical moment for me was after bishop b4 today. He had to take the brave decision of sacrificing the exchange. Probably the only move, but still you need to be able to foresee that and have the confidence to do it, because it is a pure exchange sacrifice. But he felt he was getting enough compensation. The computer thinks black should be okay, which I agree with, but some nice ideas, a nice game there by Kramnik in many aspects. Hope you've enjoyed it. Remember to become a premium member on chess24.com, and I look forward to seeing you next time.